Hi everybody, thanks for joining us for the Garden Sign Painting Project. This program is supported by the Safe at Home Manitoba Initiative and the Manitoba government. To get started, we're going to introduce you to the materials that we're going to be using to paint a sign like this. So you have a board that's supplied in your kit. If you're going to be painting any boards on your own, it's a good thing to check to see how absorbent the wood is. We gave this a little spray of sealant to help give you a little more drying time, otherwise it sucks up the paint pretty quickly. And then you've got your set of paints that have come with your kit. Your colors may vary a little bit just based on what was available, but we try to work with outdoor paints for projects like this because you're going to be placing this project in the outdoors for the most part. And they just hold up better to weather and UV. So you've got your little set of paints there. And you also have two brushes. You should have a medium-sized round brush and a small round brush. The smaller brush we're going to be using later for detail. We're going to be largely using the medium brush for the bulk of our work. In addition to that, I would suggest having a glass of water for cleaning out your brushes, as well as some paper towel. And having a piece of paper handy for practicing is always a good idea. Okay, so to start off with, we're going to be using the medium brush, and we're going to be largely working with our green paints first. So you'll want to pop those open. When you're painting your garden sign, we're not looking for perfection and we don't need it to match exactly. So we're just looking to create some balance between the two sides. Now our saying is going to go in the middle. The love grows here we're going to have in the middle, but we're going to paint that last so we can have some stuff sweeping under it, but we largely want to keep the center clear. We just want to have some foliage and some lovely flowers sweeping in from the sides. Because of the length of the board, most of the work we do is going to be at the ends. So if you want to get your medium brush and just make sure if it's got that hard finish off it, as many of them are brand new, just make sure that you get that off and soften the bristles so that it's workable. And then we're going to dip it into the green paint here. The dark green paint is what we're going to start with. And we're going to go to the corner and we're going to do a sweeping little vine with leaves. So we're just going to do a nice line. And then for balance, we'll do one to the other side as well, top corner. So just pull it all the way to the edge there. And then once you've got your line in place, we're going to add leaves to that. There's going to be lots of overlapping as we go along. So if things aren't quite placed where you want, don't worry. And we're just going to dab in some leaves. They're going to be nice rounded. We're not looking to be too precise in this project just because the wood can be fairly absorbent and we're going for kind of a rustic look. When I painted my first one, I hadn't sealed the wood first and it was sucking up the paint so quickly I was a little bit panicked to see what I could do with it. But with it having a light seal on it, it gives us a lot more time. So we're just going to pull those in and then we'll do the same over here. So we want our leaves pointing towards the tip as opposed to away. And it just sort of sweeps towards the middle. Do a nice even on both sides. Okay. If you need to pause the video for more time as we go along, don't be afraid to do that or to rewind it and just play sections of it again. We all work at different paces, so don't feel rushed by me to keep up. Or if you're working faster than me, well, this is the pace I go at. So next we're going to do two smaller, thicker vines, sort of sweeping in from the sides as well. So it's going to be very similar in shape. They're just going to be shorter but thicker. And they're going to kind of run right up to here. So for the most part, we don't need things to be exact, but I'm kind of mirroring one side to the other a little bit. And then I'm just doing a round fat leaf there. Now later we're going to go in with our small brush and we'll add a little bit of detail on top. But right now we're just trying to get this plotted out and fill up a bit of foliage. Nice simple shapes. Oh, I dipped in my light green there. Wipe that off. Just right back in the dark green. Oh, I did it again. You're probably paying better attention than me, but there's a reason I only have 2 paint pots open. I don't want to be dipping in the pink and the red at this point. If you get the wrong green, it's not too bad. Just fill it in. Now mostly you don't want your brush too wet at this point because we want to keep a fair bit of pigment in the paint. The more water you have in it, the more it's going to be thinned out, and we want to make sure that this really shows up. But if you find you're running short on paint, you can always add some water or work with a bit of a wetter brush. Now we're going to do one long sweeping one here that we're going to put a flower on later. So it's going to be fairly thin. It's going to sweep right past here. And then we'll add a flower to that later. But while we're working with our green, we're going to put our leaves in. So a big sweeping leaf. So just kind of an arc one way, and then starting there and just arc back. So you got a nice little shape like that. And you can fill that in. And then I'm going to make the one on this side, same technique, but just a bit smaller, because we don't need them being exactly the same. And if there's little bits of board showing through, this is a rustic sign, and some of it's going to be covered too when we add more layers. So don't worry if you're showing a little bit of bare wood through there. It's all going to look great in the end. And then we're going to sort of create the balance of adding one over here as well. And just that arc and arc. Now if you're not very comfortable with leaves, that's something that you can try on your practice paper. And then this one I'm just going to have overlap right over top of that. So if you're worried at all that you didn't give yourself enough space for something, don't worry, just paint right over whatever's in your way there. Okay. And then still using the green paint, we're going to add a little bit down here and over here. Okay, so the dark green, and I'm just going to add the same technique of the 2 swoops, and we'll layer in some more leaves, just bringing it in from the side. It just has a little bit peeking through and keeps it nice and colorful. And don't worry about these being the exact same with these ones. This is where we can be a bit more random. Just going to add one there, and I'll add one here. And then I'm going to pair it with a lighter leaf later, once we get to the light green paint. Just going to add a little bit more of a tip to these. You can drag that out a little bit if you want. Same over here. Now everybody's board's going to be a little bit different shaped, and some might be bigger than others. So if your board is bigger, you might just want to add more leaves, or you might want to enlarge the size of what you're working with as well. So just a tiny bit there. And I can always add more later, but this is our starting point, and then we can sort of build around this. I'm going to add one more here. And then I'm going to clean my brush. Now that we've got most of our dark green paint on there, we're going to move on to the light green, and we're going to continue to add some foliage with that. So again, with the medium brush, you're just going to dip that into there. If you've got too much water on your brush from cleaning it, just make sure that you dry it off on your paper towel. And then we're going to add in a few fun elements. So we're going to add some really spirally ones over here. So just straight, bring it right out, and then we're just going to loop it. And these can be overlapping if you want. And you can have as many things coming off of them as you like. We want to keep these fairly thin. So if you're finding that your medium brush is giving too thick of a line, then you can feel free to use your smaller brush for this as well. And we don't need to worry about being too precise with this. We just want to add a little bit of whimsy. So outdoor paints can be a little difficult to find. Some people do use regular craft paint for projects like this. I have done a couple outdoor signs in craft paint, and I have found that they hold up okay, but they do start to fade fairly quickly. Especially I find reds and yellows really don't hold their color when you're just working with craft paint, and working with an outdoor paint helps with that. So if you're overlapping like this and it's dragging a little bit through the green and the green's still wet, don't worry too much about that. But you can wait till it's a bit drier too. And just adding some swirls wherever works for you. Now that I've got those on, I'm going to add some of my light green leaves in here as well. So just overlapping what we've already done and using that same shape, I'm just going to add a couple more light green leaves in there. And again, placement is up to you. You don't need to worry about that too much here. Okay, we just want to make sure that we're keeping some spaces fairly clear to add some flowers, but again, those flowers can overlap a bit of what we're already doing. So now I've got about as much as I want for my green leaves. I'm going to add a little one here, but next I'm just going to add some bigger lines to these leaves here. These ones are fairly big and plain, and so I'm just going to add a little bit of light green over top, and it's all right if you're blending into the existing paint because they're supposed to go together. So and we kind of went over top of this filigree, this one again, so we're just going to recover that line. Okay. And then I'm done with my green for the moment, and so I can wash that out. Okay, for our next step, we're going to be using the pink paint. For this step, we don't want our colors blending. We want to keep our pink separate from the colors of our leaves. So make sure that your board and all the paints on it are nice and dry at this point. If they need a little bit more drying time, just give the video a little pause and then come back to it, or you can speed up the process by giving it a little quick blow with the blow dryer, and that'll dry them up nice and quickly. But they may just need a little bit of time, and we want to make sure that we're not painting over any wet paint for this next step. If you are ready, I've given mine a little blow with the blow dryer. You're going to need your medium brush again, and we're going to dip it into the pink paint. Some of you might have a little bit more of a purple color, and you can just dip right in there, and we're going to paint a couple of petals onto our flowers here. So we're going to do 3 simple loops for the petals, and they're going to kind of just blend into one another, and we're not worried about that. We don't need them to be distinct from one another. And just 3 petals on there. You can always add to the size of them or expand them a little bit if you want. And then you're going to come over to this one and do the same thing. 3 nice loops. I always like to have bright pink flowers in my garden. When I was a little girl, my grandma always planted bright pink flowers, and she said that white flowers were a waste, and flowers were meant to bring color, so you needed to plant bright colors. So every year I try to plant some bright pink ones for her. So we've got these 2 in here. Depending on how the paint's soaking up, you may need to add a little bit more of a coat to them. But we can just leave that for right now, and we'll grab a little bit more, and we're gonna do the basic shapes for our roses, or kind of a basic rose. And you can plant them wherever you want. Maybe just make sure you wanna get maybe a bit on both sides. I'm gonna overlap some of my foliage that I already have in place, and I'm gonna put one here. And we're just doing a basic circle. We're not looking for any detail in this part. Just a basic circle of pink. And if there's a bit more wood showing through this, we're not too worried about it. We don't need the whole thing on there. We're just have it peeking over the edge. And then I'm gonna have another one peeking through here and here a bit. And then on the other side, I'm gonna overlap actually probably most of that little leaf there, and I'm not worried about it at all. I'm gonna overlap that one. I'm saving this corner for a red flower that I'm gonna do. So I'm gonna leave that alone, and then I'm going to just add a small one here, right over top of what we've done. And then I'll have a bit more peeking out here. And just a nice round shape. We're going to go back and add the detail with the red after. Okay. So that's your pink that you've added in there. Now, while that dries, we're going to skip on to the yellow, so you can clean out that brush, give it a little dry, and then we're going to pop open your yellow container. And we're going to use the yellow to do some basic, really simple little ones like this, just peeking over the edge. And all it is a series of little circles. So you're going to dip that in there and just start painting some little circles. I start in a row of 3 or 4, and just a little row of them, little dabs. And then we're going to kind of work narrowing it a little bit with the next row. And we're going to sweep it over because we don't want it coming up straight like a cone, but it is a cone-shaped flower, sort of. It's just going to be with a little lean to it. And we don't need to be precise in how we place those. Just kind of do whatever works for you. And try not to lean in your wet paint like I am. There. So this one is pretty much done, and then we're going to go over here and I'm going to add another one, and I think I'm going to have this one sweep the same way, just right over top of some of our foliage there. And you don't have to paint these in yellow. If you want to use a different color, go right ahead. They kind of remind me of those purple butterfly flowers that you can plant in your garden to attract butterflies. And then I might just add a little bit of one peeking out over here. Just nice simple dots, nothing difficult, but it adds a lot of brightness to the picture. And then we're going to dry that out, or wash that out, and we're going to give it a minute to dry before we move on to our red paint. Okay, once your paint is fairly dry, we're going to pop open that red and we're going to add some red flowers. Still using the medium brush, we're going to add some more Gerber daisy-like looking flowers. I like to position one up here. I kind of had one planned for here, and I'm going to peek one out over here too. So it's going to just be a quarter of the flower that I plan to see here, just filling up this corner, but you can have as much of it showing as you like. And just kind of going from a thick stroke out and then narrowing as it goes in. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. And then just kind of having it come to the center, and then you can thicken up any of them that you want, maybe make them a little chubbier. And I'm going to end up painting right over that leaf, which is totally fine because we can add more leaves at the end if we want to. And I'm just going to pull them right in there. Okay, so I've got one there. I'm going to peek one out over here. You're going to see more the half side of it. And just kind of pick a point that you're moving your brush towards that's going to be the center of your flower. And just kind of keep your petals the same length moving towards it. We'll create this center a bit later. Put our thickest part of the petals away, so we want to start on the outside and then move to the center. And then I'll even peek one out over here. I'm going to do a small one here. I'm just going to cross them right over. Just a bunch of crossing petals. Okay, and then we're going to add the center of those flowers once that's nice and dry, but we're just going to leave it for now as we move on to adding a bit of detail to our red or our pink flowers using the red. So you can wash out your medium brush and then just set it to the side. Get a little dry, set it to the side, and then we're going to pick up our smaller brush. And again, you want to make sure that any of the stiffness is out of it, and if you need to give it a little rinse, go ahead and do that. But we want to make sure that we're not carrying much water in there because we're looking to be a bit more precise, and if there's more water, it's going to run a bit more. So we're going to start, I'm just going to add a little bit of red detail to these flowers here. So just pick up a little bit of red and just adding in a couple little strokes coming towards the center. Do the same thing here. I keep putting my hand or my arm in the wet paint over here, so just be careful about doing that, or make sure you've got your sleeves rolled up. Okay, so I've got that. We'll be adding a couple more things with green a bit later to those. And then we're going to add the detail to these little rose-like flowers here. Now, this is where a piece of scrap paper coming in handy is a good idea if you haven't done these before. It's just a really simple C pattern that we're going to do. So we're going to start with a nice tight little C in the middle, and then we'll work out and we'll cozy another C into it, and then overlap that, and we just want to keep the petals overlapping. And we don't need to be too precise, we just want to keep overlapping and overlapping as we build out our flowers, okay? So you might not have an exact middle, like this one's off center, but I can sort of imagine where my center would have been and just keep building on it. And this takes a bit of time, so if you need to pause to catch up or just take a little break during it, go right ahead. But don't give yourself a hard time about precision, because that's not what we're going for here, just a nice rustic sign. And building the size of those C's as you work outward on the flower is also something you want to pay attention to. And just working right to the edge of that pink. And don't worry about if you're covering every last bit or if you're perfectly on the circle. That's not a big concern for us. Okay. You can see it's already starting to come together. Doing the last of these little ones here. Okay, and so that's the bulk of our flowers. We're just going to give it a little rinse, and then we're going to go back and add some yellow to these daisies. They're probably still fairly wet, so if they're too wet to work with, you can give it a dry or give it a little pause. But I think mine are doing okay that I can just add my centers to them. So I'm just looking to do some overlapping dots, sort of like here. I'm going to do it with yellow, but you can choose to do it with any of the colors there. And just add a couple dots in there. There, until you feel like it looks good, and I'm pretty happy with that. And that's kind of it for our flowers. Now, as I look at this, there's a couple areas that I want to add. I want to add a little bit more greenery here, so I'm going to grab a bit more green and do that. And we're going to add some detail to our leaves. So you can always add a couple extra leaves if you want, if you feel like you've got some bare spots. Feel free to do that. You've got lots of paint. And you can have them look however you want. If you want to do any swirly ones with the dark green, go ahead and do that. Add one here as well. And if you're pretty happy with what you've got, then we're going to go in and add the detail to those leaves. Just a little bit more detail. So clean out that big brush, and then we're going to grab our little brush again. So just grabbing a touch of a little paint there, I'm gonna add just some lines and some extra bits to these leaves. So there's no rules or real plan to it. I just add a couple of outlines to them and sweep them in. Okay. Just keeps it interesting looking, having that bit of contrast on there. Okay. And with this flower, actually, I like to add a little sort of spot where it's budding out of. Just add a couple of lines, whatever feels right to you. Okay. And then we want to do the same on the light green with adding a little bit of dark green. Just sweep in a couple of lines wherever it looks right to you. Okay. And I'm pretty happy with that. But you can keep working away at it as much as you like. The next step is we're going to get this to dry completely, and then we're going to do our last step, which is going to be our stencil. So you want to make sure that your brush is nice and clean. And set that aside and just give your painting a few minutes to dry. Okay, once your board is nice and dry, we're going to move in with the stencil. If you're comfortable freehanding it, you can go ahead and do that. That's up to you, but that does make some people a little nervous. So stencils are handy. Freehanding, I always find it's nice to do a light pencil outline just to plan things out and make sure that you're using your space how you want to first. But a stencil makes things really simple for us. So you're going to take your stencil, you're going to pop out some of your spaces, anything that might be hanging there. And because there's some areas missing, we need to still have some control. We're not going full just filling in on this. I always think it's a good idea to tape your stencil down, position it about the middle, and we're just going to lightly tape it down so that it's not moving on us. Now you can use either your medium brush or your small brush, it's up to you. I'm going to use my medium one, and you want to keep it fairly dry. You don't want to carry a lot of water in your brush because you don't want it running under the stencil. So you don't want to carry too much paint at a time either. Just be patient and give yourself, don't be afraid to go back and recoat. And you're just going to slowly fill things in. Now with your letters, like your O, just going lightly around the outside, and then you're going to fill in to make it the shape that you want it to be. So following that stencil, and then I like mine to be a little bit thicker on the sides. And if when you pull off your stencil, if you need to fill in anything, just go ahead and do that. And same thing with your E here. You're not going to fill in that whole space, you're just going to run it around the edge of that. And then we can do any touch-ups that we need to. Just running that right around the edge. Okay. Okay. Once you're all done, you can peel off your stencil and have a look at your words. If there's anything that you want to touch up, you can go ahead and do that. Anywhere that you feel you might need to fill in a little bit more paint. But it's going to be a little bit rustic, and that's how we want it to be. And it overlaps nicely on your leaves, but you just may need to fill in a few spots. There, and all done. If you are happy with your project, you can put it outside, you can lean it on something. I know my last one I just nailed to a fence post in our yard. You can also drill holes through it and run a string through to hang it somewhere. Whatever really works for you. But I hope that you've enjoyed this project and that you'll join Midwest Arts Council for more projects like this in the future. Thank you very much for your time.